Hello, welcome to another Times Radio Members Question and Answer. Now today we're answering comments from our channel members on Frontline episodes and other videos on the war in Ukraine and its impact on the world stage. I'm Philip Ingram. I currently host Frontline, but I'm a former senior military intelligence officer and global commentator on all things geopolitics, military, security, and anything else people want me to talk about. Now, I've got some great questions today. The first one, going straight into it, from Marty. And Marty, your point is, surely China's interests are not with Russia. They'll be with investments into things that support the Chinese economy and the party itself, of course. China is careful enough to not only support the aggressor like Russia, like we support Ukraine, but should Putin's regime fall, you could imagine China taking some interest in making sure that they get even more influence over what comes next. Marty, you've hit the nail on the head. China is interested in China's interests. It's looking for what it can get out of it. The one thing that it likes that Russia is doing is it's causing political dislocation across the West. So anything that can cause political dislocation, that can stop the West focusing on what China's doing, very subtly expanding, very subtly carrying out its own operations across Southeast Asia. Anything that takes the West's focus away from China is something that they will support. Also, you're right, it's what can China get out of it. So Chinese access into Russian raw materials, oil, gas, and other items that China can use to build up its economy. But China is very carefully keeping Russia not quite at arm's length, but not pulling it in as close as Vladimir Putin thinks the relationship is. Because China's interests are making sure that its trade focus doesn't get disrupted by Western sanctions. And of course, China's biggest market is the West. So they've got this careful balancing act that's going on. And therefore, Xi Jinping is playing Putin as much as Putin is playing Donald Trump. So Marty, you come in with another point. You say, I guess Putin offered some praise to the negotiating skills of Donald just to play his ego. Along these lines, Putin might have added the prospectus for US deals with Russia if they only let Putin have Ukraine. Putin is playing Donald Trump. He's playing to what he thinks Donald Trump wants to hear. He's playing the art of the business deal, but at the same time, not giving away anything that is forcing him to move into any position. He's trying to throw carrots out to Trump so that Trump doesn't come down hard on Putin. And he's watching that quite closely. We have to remember that Donald Trump is a businessman, first and foremost. He approaches things from a business perspective. But actually, if you look at the business deals over the years, whilst he's made billions of dollars, he's failed in more businesses than he's been successful in working through. Vladimir Putin thinks of things from a different perspective. He's a former intelligence officer and a former Soviet intelligence officer. His is all about manipulating the individual, human intelligence, getting in there and trying to get that individual to work to your priorities. And he's doing that quite well with Donald Trump. And of course, Donald Trump's top team that are supporting him, we're getting Steve Witkoff, we're getting JD Vance, and we're getting Marco Rubio, all getting involved in it. But they're butting up against hugely experienced teams, headed up by the Russian Foreign Minister Lavrov. There is no comparison between the experiences of the two sides when it comes to diplomatic manipulation. And the Americans are being diplomatically manipulated here. You'll see that in a lot of the commentary that's come out in Frontline this week. So next question comes from Nick. Wouldn't a negotiation in bad faith be infinitesimally worse than no negotiation at all? I agree with you and I disagree with you, Nick. Yes, a negotiation in bad faith if it was just continuing to waste time and nothing was going to come out of it, it is just wasting time. It's taking political capital away from trying to achieve something more positive. However, balance that off against no negotiation at all. I think there is a positive that comes from both sides of a conflict actually sitting down and talking. And you have to recognise the point when your investment in that time and effort to sit down and talk is not going to achieve anything, and you have to walk away until the conditions have been set for you to come back together again. But actually, I take it as a positive that we've got both sides coming down and sitting around that table. Whether it is going to achieve anything, whether it is bad faith at the moment, I don't think enough has happened yet for us to see that. But talking is better than fighting. The trouble is we've got talking and fighting going on at the same time now. Let's hope the talking moves somewhere. So Nick, you come in with another one. Of course, just peace is ambiguous, and with ambiguity around the world, just, fair, or barely acceptable. I think just peace is in the eye of the beholder, and a just peace for Ukraine is the restoration of Ukraine's internationally recognised borders pre-Russia's invasion in 2014. Just peace from Putin is Ukraine gives up the whole of its eastern territories, including the areas that Russia hasn't captured so far. And actually I think just peace for Russia would be the collapse of the Ukrainian government and the installation of a Russian puppet government controlling the whole of Ukraine. And therefore, from examining it from both sides' perspective, we're in the horns of a dilemma. And the path to get those two horns joining up so that both sides can come onto just the same sheet of paper, never mind work out where there can be compromises, I think is going to be really difficult indeed. Barely acceptable, you can't have barely acceptable on either side. Zelensky has to be able to produce something that he can sell to the Ukrainian people. He is a democratically elected president. The Ukrainian people have sacrificed so much already. I think they would be willing to continue the fight for national survival. Putin, on the other hand, has got the ability to negotiate and give in, but is not doing anything. He's a dictator. He doesn't care. And he doesn't care how many Russian lives he loses as this goes on. So Steve, you come in with the next point and say nobody brings up how many civilians Putin has killed or how much damage Putin has done, with which is in the trillions of dollars. Why are NATO and Western allies wringing their hands over a few $1 billion of aid? Steve, I don't think NATO and Western allies are wringing their hands over a few $1 billion of aid. I think countries are giving an awful lot of aid, and that aid is being split into the military aid that is going to Ukraine, that's costing billions of dollars. But also there's an awful lot of aid being built up and a lot of discussion going around getting the funds put in place for Ukraine to be reconstructed and rebuilt once the conflict is finished. There's lots of debate going on in different countries as to when the aid packages are going to be given, how much can be given. And a lot of that's down to the fact that I think we're running out of military capability to physically give Ukraine. Our stocks are low, and we have to make sure that we've invested in our defence industrial bases and can rebuild those up again. And then you've got internal politics that comes into it. So national politics will always trump what's going on, excuse me using the Trump word, but trump what's going on from an international perspective. Have to look after the home nation first. And using that Trump example in coming in, Donald Trump is focusing on what he believes the priority for US first is within this. And you add all that together, and that's why there's a slow trickle of aid going into Ukraine. And of course, we can't start rebuilding Ukraine until Russia stops destroying it. There's a lot of money being put in to make sure that there's increased robustness in Ukraine's energy systems and essential national infrastructure, its critical national infrastructure, and a lot of investment into getting capabilities to be able to repair it fast if it gets hit, and to put resilience into the different systems so that it's more difficult for Russia to destroy it. I don't think there's ever going to be enough money, enough effort, enough military capability put in at the right times to have this sort of effect that people would want. Reality comes into play, and it's the reality of national and international politics that's playing here. Gobsmacked 42. Come on, Gobsmacked 42, tell us what your actual name is. I can't keep going and calling you Gobsmacked as we're doing through, but you're commenting on an interview with former US Ambassador to Ukraine, William B. Taylor, on Times Radio during the week. And You ask, why are you guys sane-washing Trump? Why are you pretending that he cares anything but self-enrichment? He wants Ukraine to surrender. That's one side of the spectrum, and Donald Trump actually doesn't seem to care a lot of the time. He seems to flip-flop between supporting Vladimir Putin or easing off on the pressures he's putting on President Zelensky of Ukraine. We saw the deliberate ambush, and I was talking to former US Ambassador Herbst only yesterday on Frontline, and he agreed with me that the Oval Office was an ambush of Zelensky by J.D. Vance and then Donald Trump. That had been set up. And then we get the thawing of the relations after that iconic meeting, or it was an iconic photograph of the meeting that they both had in the Vatican. And then we had this phone call between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin that went on for 2 hours, and it seems as if Donald Trump has gone back to the Russian side again. Can you be accused of sane-washing Trump? I don't think anyone knows what his position is, because he keeps changing it so often, and I suspect many in his team don't know what it is, and we have to wait until he wakes up in the morning. Does he care about anything but self-enrichment? I think to a degree he does in what he's saying, and we saw that with his commentary on South Africa and his commentary elsewhere. I think the other thing he cares about is his Nobel Peace Prize. Is that self-enrichment? Yes, it probably is. And he wants Ukraine to surrender. I don't think he wants Ukraine to surrender, but I don't think he's pushing Putin back hard enough, because Putin wants Ukraine to surrender. But good questions. But do tell us who your name is. Astro, again, come on, let us know who you are so that I can talk to you properly. You say, thank you, Philip, for responding to my question. The Ronald Reagan Library near Camillero, California, does contain an Air Force One. I visited the library and was impressed. Trump would like to take a similar present for his future library, even though he doesn't seem to be much of a reader. I'm not sure what it is that's in the library in California and an Air Force One. I presume it's the aircraft. And yes, Donald Trump has said he does want to take the aircraft. I think actually the gift, and you're talking of this gift of the 747 from the Middle East country Qatar, or Qatar, as you like to call it in American. I think there's going to be real difficulties in converting the gift from Qatar into Air Force One, because in effect, to try and make sure it reaches all of the security criteria that are going to be needed, you have to strip everything out of it. All the avionics, all of the insides, these luxury insides that Donald Trump likes and everything else, and then go through each individual component by component level and then rebuild it again. That's going to cost hundreds of millions of dollars and take an awful long time. So let's say if that aircraft actually does come into play as Air Force One, there's nothing to stop it becoming a passenger aircraft to take US diplomats around the world. But again, you're getting the areas properly swept so that there can be those sensitive discussions that diplomats need to have as they're moving around. It's going to be difficult. There's going to be a balance. Mind you, there could be a presidential order signed to say, we don't care about security. That's taking a big risk. And as I used to do that sort of security stuff, I would be someone going in and putting my size 9s in the president's in tray saying, Mr. President, you can't do this. But then would anyone else do that? Anyway, thanks for watching this week's question and answer and for posting your questions. Please remember, give us your name because it helps. But if you want access to exclusive videos and have your membership questions answered, please sign up for Time Zero membership. I'm Philip Ingram. Thank you. Goodbye.